Good afternoon everyone. We are going to discuss about the historical foundations of education.
Diba there are times nga makapuyan ta sa tuwang pagskwela labi naatay failures sa school and we sometimes questioned ourselves nga kinsa may nagbuhat aning pagskwela diin manigikan ang pagskwela
Ug nganong naa may ingon ani or what if wala ni? So in this topic we will find out the answers of those questions. The beliefs and experiences of education today rest on the history of these fields of endeavor. By knowing what accomplishments of leaders in the past, today's educators attempt to build on their achievements, meaning we are obviously adopting and making progress of our history. For example, their education before is very simple. If you are a male, you will become a teacher if you finish 3 years in primary. But today, you are required to finish or graduate in college. And in primitive education, their livelihood before kay only hunting and gathering wild fruits and vegetables. Today, we can have an income na through online selling, especially mga snacks or even pre-loved clothes. Before ipanghatag ra karon gipang baligya na. There was no reading or writing. The information was only transmitted through word of mouth, songs, gestures, ceremonial rites, and the like, meaning there was no books to read before. The aims of education: first, security and survival, since the fundamental problem then was still alive, to protect oneself and their family from the destructive forces of nature or from dangers that could be inflicted by natural phenomena such as typhoons, floods, earthquakes, etc., or by fierce, wild, and poisonous animals and reptiles such as lions, tigers, snakes, and rats, or even evil spirits, hunger because of scarcity of foods, and other tribes which were hostile to them. Second, conformity. Conformity brought together families, clans, and tribes so that they could conquer common dangers. Primitive people have been able to survive by subordinating the interests of the individual to the interest of the group. Primitive education aimed at securing the continued existence of the group by restricting the activities of its members. Unlike in complex democratic cultures where education seeks to achieve social security by increasing the intelligence, skills, and freedom of all its members. Preservation and transmission of traditions. The ways they were doing things were the best and they want to preserve it and be transmitted to the incoming generation. These are some of the characteristics of primitive education: relatively simple, relatively narrow social and cultural context, extraordinary, conservative, and prone to superstitions. Later, I will discuss why superstitions is a characteristic of primitive education. Organizational of primitive life is tribal, not political, so that one function of education is to enable one to live with his relatives. Absence from primitive cultures of reading and writing. The types of education: first, vocational. This includes learning the skills in procuring basic necessities of life like hunting, constructing a hut, etc. Second, religious or animistic. That's why primitive education is prone to superstitions because they are learning how to participate in ritualistic practices to please or to appease the unseen spirits roaming around. They truly believe in evil spirits.
Egyptian education. Egypt, the gift of the Nile, is situated in the northern part of the African continent. So the Egypt is the gift of the Nile. It is because Nile River is the longest river in Africa. Ancient Egypt was a desert only watered by the Nile River, which flooded the country from August to October, leaving behind a very rich black earth. It is stated that rich black earth it is because the Nile River consists of black soil. So the government of Egypt was autocratic. It is ruled by the absolute power, and that is the Pharaoh. Aims of Egyptian education. First, training of scribes. So when we say scribes, a person who served as a professional copyist, because during that time we don't have the printer that is very usable to have a lot of copies. So kinahanglan na ay kanang scribe para na ay mag-copy sa information to attain that education. Number 2, religious or the belief of religion. 3, Utilitarian. This is designed to be useful or practical rather than being attractive. And next, and lastly, the preservation of cultural patterns. So they aim to preserve the cultural patterns. Types of education. First, religious education. So about religion. Second, vocational or professional education like teacher education, any 4 years or 2 years plus a profession. 3, military education. 4, public administration like for example who serve in a city hall or in a barangay hall. 5, priesthood education, so about being a priest. And lastly, the home arts education. Content to be studied. First, reading, writing, and the language. So, kutsabot naman na. Second, religious or the belief of religion and secular literature. So, when we say secular literature, this is a literature or any literature which is not rooted in religious belief. Third, artistry in metals and lapidary like engraving, cutting, or polishing stone and gems. Fourth, mathematics. So, inyong favorite, dili ako. So, especially geometry and surveying. So, when we say geometry, it's about the sizes, the shapes, the angle, the dimension, position, nana ba. So, were studied due to the frequent inundation of their field which washed away the landmark which had to be replaced. So, kinahanglang ilisan. So, that is why they have content to be studied like mathematics. Fifth, subject and astronomy like study of sun, moon, star, planets, manana. Engineering, architecture, physics, medicine, embalming, dentistry, and law were taught in the temple schools by the priests. So it was taught by the priests in the temple schools. So 6, music, dancing, playing the harp, cymbals, drum, lyre, guitar, tambourine, and clapping to rhythm. So, manana. 7 is sports, games, and physical education like swimming, wrestling, archery, and hunting, and fishing taken as vocation and avocation. So, it could be a hobby or na trained lang yun ta. And lastly, the military schools offered training in the use of bow and arrow, battle axe, lance, mace, and shield. That is why Egypt became a military power in the ancient world. From 1600 to 1400 BC. Outstanding contribution of Egypt education. So the outstanding contribution of the early Egyptians to education were probably geometrical measurement and surveying. So katong mga about the sizes, the shapes, and surveying. So that is the outstanding contribution of Egypt education. So under the academic track, there are 4 strands. The ABM, the UMS, STEM, and GAS. So accountancy, business, and management, or the ABM. Hello there, guys. So this subtest gauges the ability of the students in solving problem situation involving knowledge in some basic concepts of accounting, business, and management. So mo ni ang gikuha sa nga strand sa katong mahimong future accountant, mga business woman and man. So next is the Humanities and Social Science or UMS. This subtest measures ability that require historical knowledge sa mga history sa nang So objectivity, civic competence, aptitude in the arts and originality, also leadership, self-discipline, propriety, and mentoring skills which are necessary in the field of education are likewise measured.
Now I will discuss the topic of Greek education. So the Greeks are a mixture of the Aryan and Germanic people, the two great races. But because of the process of the natural barriers such as mountain and bodies of water, they lived in tribal isolation and developed differences. They considered it as an honor to serve their country in any capacity. And there were many Greek city-states, but two of them rose above all others, and these were the Sparta and Athens. The Spartan Education. Sparta was in the south of Corinth in the southern section of Peloponnesian Peninsula. Spartan education was based upon the laws of Lycurgus. Lycurgus is a lawgiver in Sparta, and it was also the basis of Spartan political, social, and educational system. And these turned Sparta into a totalitarian soldier state. So when we say totalitarian soldier state, it is a form of government that controlled the lives of its citizens. And the system lasted for 700 years from the 9th to the 2nd century BC, especially during the 5th century. There were two aims of education in Sparta, and these were military and discipline. Military, to make every citizen invincible in war, possessing physical perfection and complete obedience to the state. So they have this type of education for them to get ready with the war physically. And second is discipline, to develop conformity and obedience, courage, strength, cunning, endurance, and patriotic efficiency. So when we say cunning, it has something to do, or it talks about the crafts and art. There were different types of content to be studied in Spartan education. And the first one is intensive gymnastics and paramilitary exercises. So when we say paramilitary exercises, it is a semi-militarized force in which gipractice na nila dito ang mga pang-military nga gipangbuhat. And second is practice in moral and social habits for the state, such as controlling the appetite, modesty, obedience and respect, and listening intently to elders. So it is very important for them to practice moral and social habits for the betterment of their state. And the third one is reading and writing to a limited extent to understand the Lycurgus laws and some poems of Homer. So they already have this kind of education, or they already taught how to read and write, and also to understand more about the Lycurgus laws, which is very important also in their state, and some poems of Homer. Homer is a known poet which gives a contribution in the world of poetry. Fourth is music with serious moral and martial rhythm to arouse patriotism. So, ang ilang mga music dito is about their love and devotion sa ilahang state or ilahang country, which is the Sparta. And the fifth one is speech had to be laconic and terse. So when we say laconic and terse, it means concise and brief. So, and the last one is for girls, gymnastics to make them strong, to bear strong children also. So it is very important, especially sa mga girls, nga mag-practice of gymnastics para ma-ready sa ilahang pagpanganak. Now let's talk about the Athenian education. Ancient Athens was the leading cultural center of the Greek world. Many of the most gifted writers of Greece lived there. They wrote works of drama, history, lyric, poetry, and philosophy that have influenced literature up to the present time. In many ways, the city was also a birthplace of Western civilization. Education was supervised by the state, although education was not compulsory. Unlike there is a Philippines, which is compulsory jud ang pag-eskwela, and it was not clear also. However, the state maintained public schools. Aims of education: good citizenship, individual excellence, and man-sided development. So, man-sided development, it has something to do with the human development. And the types of education were civic training. It has something to do with the leadership in their state. And the second is moral training. Moral training for good values or maayong pamatasan sa mga tao. And the third one is physical education, which is also, we have it here in the Philippines, education. And the fourth one is intellectual education. It has something to do with knowledge or learnings. And the last one is art, which is also, we have it here sa ato ang education. Content to be studied in Athenian education. First is reading by the alphabet method. Second, writing on wax and tablets. So for them to be able to write on the wax, they use pointed material or instrument. Third, arithmetic for market use. Example of arithmetic are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Fourth is Homeric and other poems. So, gi-study gyapon nila dito ang mga poems ni Homer. Next is gymnastic exercises, physical education exercises, and the last one is the military training subject. Later Athenian education. Athens became an empire in 479 BC when Greeks defeated the Persians at the Battle of Plataea. So the Battle of Plataea was the final land battle during the Persian invasion of Greece. So Athens, the head of the Delian Confederation, contributed largely to the victory. The triumph brought about attitudinal changes toward education among Athenians. So after the war, there were different changes about the educational system among Athenians. Aims of education are the following: by sophist, pragmatic, and utilitarian. So sophist is a teacher in philosophy. He focused in dealing with practicality. Second, by Socrates, development of the power of thinking. So with this method, the teacher can make a student sharpen their reasoning faculty. Third is by Plato, control by individual rulers. Plato is also an Athenian philosopher. Fourth is by Aristotle, the rational living. So he emphasizes with the logical reasoning also. Types of education are the following: moral training, professional training, intellectual training, vocational training, which is also we have it here in the Philippines, domestic training, physical, military, and civic training, science and philosophy education, aesthetic and cultural education, and the last one are the sports and games. So, naad or nausab nga educational system after the Battle of Plataea. Mas na-enhance or nadagdagan ang mga types of education in Athens. Following are the content to be studied in the later Athenian education. First is in the lower elementary level. They already practice how to read and write. Also, they study arithmetic, poetry, and gymnastics. Second, in the higher elementary level, they already practice physical and military exercises, grammar, declamation, argumentation, and public speaking. So, ilaha dito sayo jud kayo gitudlo ang mga pang military nga exercises. Unlike diri sa Philippines, nasa elementary wala pa jud na ang mga military nga mga subjects. Third is in secondary schools, geometry, astronomy, drawing, grammar, and rhetorics. So, mao ni ang mga content in the secondary schools. The fourth one is in the higher level, which is they already taught philosophy, mathematics, and science. The outstanding contributions to education and humanity. First is the Socratic method of teaching by Socrates. Second is in the realm of philosophy, in which the greatest world philosophers came from Greece, among whom were Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Third, another is in the field of mathematics. Euclidean geometry has been studied for 2,000 years and it is still used up to the present time. Fourth is arts and classical literature are also great contributions. Of the contributions of the arts and classical literature are the School of Athens and the Odyssey and Iliad by the known poet Homer.
The first period of Roman education coincided with the founding of the city of Rome. Education was carried out largely in the home and schooling was purely through apprenticeship and hands-on training. The aims of education: first, utilitarian. It emphasized a practical training for military life and citizenship, acquired through memorization of the laws and the historical tradition of Rome. It was not until the Romans succumbed to the cultural influence of the Greeks that they began to provide formal schooling. Second, moral. Moral training was for the development of moral virtues. Third, military. Military training was imperative for soldiers who would be conquerors in war. Fourth, civic and political. To make men know their rights and obligations to the states. Civic training was also exercised so that they could participate wisely in politics. The good citizen was obedient to authority, pious, frugal, and honest. Fifth, religious training was tied up to moral and civic training. Children were trained in religious ceremonies and usages. The content to be studied in the elementary education were included rudiments of reading, writing, and calculation. Arithmetic was primitive because of the cumbersome Roman notation. The 12 tables later gave way to the Latin translation of Homer. The 12 tables: first, courts; second, trial; third, execution of judgment; fourth, paternal power; fifth, inheritance and guardianship; six, ownership and possession; seven, real property; eight, torts or delicts; nine, public law; 10, sacred law; 11, supplementary laws; 12, continuation of supplementary laws. In higher schools, rhetorics was the chief study. This included declamation, extemporaneous speaking, debates on points of Roman law and moral principles, especially ethical and cultural content, history, music, astronomy, philosophy, etc. In the university, applied science and professions such as law, medicine, architecture, and mechanics were in the curriculum. The outstanding contributions to education and civilization. The major contributions of the Roman to education and civilization are their methods of organization, management, and administration. They had constructed a carefully organized education ladder, which probably became the forerunner of many ladderized education systems of today. Another was the Rome-organized body of civil law, which became the basis of the legal systems in many countries, including the Philippines. Next is the historical foundations of education in the Philippines. Pre-Spanish period before 1512. In pre-colonial period, the type of education is informal and unstructured. The home serves as their school, the parents are their teachers, focus more on vocational than academics. Again, vocational is like hunting and constructing a hut. Fifth, tribal tutors, for example, the babaylan. But the babaylan, by the way, is a Visayan term identifying an indigenous Filipino religious leader who functions as a healer or a miracle worker. The babaylan can be male or female, but most of the babaylan were female. 6. Most communities, stories, songs, poetry, dances, medicinal practices, and advice regarding all sorts of community life issues were passed from generation to generation, mostly through oral tradition. 7. Some communities utilize a writing system known as baybayin. Baybayin literally means to spell or to write. 8. Alibata, composed of 17 symbols representing the letters of the alphabet. The methods of education. First, tell me or show me or demonstration method. Second, alibata or baybayin, which is composed of 14 consonant sounds and 3 vowels. The 14 consonant sounds are used in abacada, and the 3 vowels are a, i, u, or the a, i, u. 3. Oral, practical, and hands-on NIP. Spanish period. 1521 to 1896. The Spanish contributions. Education was formal. Established schools from the primary level to the tertiary level of education. Mauna ni nga time nga naanay elementary, high school, and college, but separated pa ang school sa boys and girls. Focus on the Christian doctrines, ilustrados were accommodated in the schools. Missionary teachers or friars replaced the tribal tutors. As what I have mentioned a while ago, the tribal tutors is those who functions as a healer or a miracle workers. Catholic doctrine schools that were set up initially became parochial schools which taught reading and writing along with catechism. I've experienced this one when I was in elementary. There are catechists who take part as a teacher, and their topics are, of course, related to spiritual beliefs. Education Decree of 1863 mandated the establishment of free primary schools in each town, one for boys and one for girls, with a precise number of schools depending on the size of the population. Methods of teaching: A. Catechetical instruction, use of corporal punishment, rote memorization, instruction was in dialect. Spanish contribution rules: first, the friars controlled the educational system. Second, the missionaries took charges in teaching, controlling, and maintaining the rules and regulations. That's why naay mga Catholic or religious schools. Third, parochial schools were led by Dominicans and Jesuits. Fourth, establishment of normal school for maid teachers under the supervision of the Jesuits. Jesuits are the members of the Society of Jesus, a Roman Catholic order of religious men.
American contribution 1898 to 1935. So the American contribution in the Philippine education is the course of study is prescribed, uniform, and centralized. So that is why manang natay prescribed nga in every university or mga schools nga atong giatinan so natay mga uniform. Next is formal structured and existence of educational system. So formal structure like the organizational chart, manana, the existence of educational system like sa public school na kinder to high school. So 1899, more schools were open. So daghan during 1899 daghan na ang eskwelahan nga nangaabli with 24 English language teachers and 4,500 ka students. Act number 74, a highly centralized or uniform experimental public school system was installed in 1901 by the Philippine Commission. So Act number 74, so during 1901, the Philippine Commission installed a public school system. Between 1901 and 1902, Philippine Commission authorized the Secretary of Public Instruction to bring more than 1,000 teachers from the United States who were called the Thomasites. So kanang mga English nga teacher during that time called Thomasites to the Philippines. So ang Philippine Commission nag-authorize or gisugo niya ang Secretary of Public Instruction nga magbring og 1,000 teachers from United States. So these teachers were scattered throughout the island, established barangay schools. The same law established the Philippine Normal School, so now the Philippine Normal University, to train aspiring Filipino teachers. The high school system was supported by provincial governments and included special educational institutions, School of Arts and Trades, and Agricultural School, and Commerce and Marine Institutes, which were established in 1902 by the Philippine Commission. Act number 372 authorized the opening of provincial high school. So there that time, so nanay train about Filipino teachers, nanay mga lain nga educational institutions like School of Arts and Trades, Agricultural, Commerce, and Marine Institutes. This is during 1902 by the Philippine Commission Act number 372. So another act number 1870 initiated the opening of the University of the Philippines. So ilang gi-initiate ang pag-open sa University of the Philippines, and UP is now the country's national university. Sana all. So its attainment is during 1908. So act number 1381, also known as Gabaldon Law, it was passed in 1907. So this law provided for the funding of 1 million peso for construction of modern public school across the Philippines. So muna ang Gabaldon Law. So the recognition of Act of 1916 provided that all department secretaries except the Secretary of Public Instruction must be a natural-born Filipino. So Act number 1916 provided that a secretaries nga dapat natural-born Filipino except sa Secretary of Public Instruction. Kay kabantay mo, the Secretary of Public Instruction mo ang gisugo nga magkuha og katong 1,000 ka teachers from United States. So that is during the American period.
The Japanese contribution to the educational history of the Philippines. The Japanese contribution to the course of study are the following: prescribed, it means recommended; uniform and centralized. Centralized means that the administrative education is vested in which in the Philippines naay usa ka department nga mag-manage sa mga curriculum or mga budget sa education, in which it is the Department of Education. 6 basic principles of Japanese education. So the first one is to stop depending on Western countries like the US and Great Britain, and also to promote and enrich the Filipino culture. Number 2, to recognize that the Philippines is part of the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, so that the Philippines and Japan will have a good relations. The third principle is to be aware of materialism to raise the morality of the Filipinos. And the fourth one is to learn and adopt Nihongo and to stop using the English language. So this means nga para muundang na daw ta sa paggamit sa English language, ug ang ato na lang gamiton is ang Japanese language, which is the Nihongo. Next is to spread elementary and vocational education, so which is naa na siya diri sa Philippines nga natay elementary og vocational education. And the last one is to develop love for work. So mao to ang mga basic principles nga na-contribute sa Japan diri sa Philippine education. The present education system in the Philippines, 1946 to up to the present time. So the Philippine education system was patterned to the educational systems of Spain and of the United States after the liberation of the Philippines in 1946. So the Philippine education system had also moved in various directions of its own. And the elementary and high school is compulsory, which is administered by the Department of Education. So makita man jud nato diri sa Philippines nga compulsory jud ang pag-eskwela sa high school and elementary. Education in the Philippines, managed and regulated by the Department of Education. So this is for the basic education. Next is the Commission on Higher Education, or also known as CHED. And iyang gikater ani is ang tertiary education. Next is the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or the TESDA. So ang iyang gikater pud ani is ang Vocational and Technical Education. The DepEd is responsible for the K-12 basic education. So it exercises full and exclusive control over public schools and nominal regulation over private schools, and it also enforces the national curriculum that has been put in place since 2013. So, ang DepEd jud ang naay control sa curriculum sa educational system diri sa Philippines. And also, DepEd has the control in the public schools and also regulation sa private schools. And the DepEd is also responsible for the K to 12 basic education which we have it right now in the Philippines. So mao ni ang former educational system sa Philippines from 1945 up to June 5, 2011. These are the lists of schools: kindergarten, primary, and secondary. So before, ang kindergarten was not compulsory. So under the primary are grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So, ang other name ani niya is intermediate. So, in grade 1, ang maka-eskwela is 6 to 7, and in grade 2, 7 to 8, grade 3, 8 to 9, grade 4, 9 to 10, grade 5, 10 to 11, and in grade 6, 11 to 12. And under sa secondary schools, are first year, also known as freshman, second year, also known as sophomore, third year or junior, fourth year, senior. So, ang maka-eskwela sa first year are ages 12 to 13, and in second year, 13 to 14, third year, 14 to 15, and in fourth year, 15 to 16 years old. In the year 2010, Senator Benigno Aquino III expressed his desire to implement the K-12 basic education cycle to increase the number of years of compulsory education to 13 years. So si Senator Benigno Aquino kay nag-express sa iyang desire nga mag-implement og K-12 basic education. So, mapun-an ang number of years of compulsory education to 13 years diri sa Philippines. So, mao ni ang basic education system, the K to 6, 4, and 2. The Kindergarten Education Act of 2012 state that the kindergarten is already compulsory, unlike before nga dili pa siya compulsory ang kindergarten. We also have the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, and in the school year 2011 to 2012, the DepEd has already implemented the K-12 program, and it was still enacted into law to guarantee its continuity in the succeeding years. The general features of K-12 education program are the following: strengthening early childhood education or the universal kindergarten. Next is making the curriculum relevant to the learners or the contextualization and enhancement, and also ensuring integrated and seamless learning or the spiral progression. Another general feature of the K-12 is building proficiency through language or mother tongue-based multilingual education. Next is gearing up for the future. So this is for the senior high school. And lastly, nurturing the holistically developed Filipino, or this is for the college and livelihood readiness or for the 21st century skills. And now let's talk about the preschool. This is ages 3 to 5. And the students learn the alphabet, numbers, shapes, and colors through games, songs, and dances in their mother tongue. So, ang mother tongue, mauni ang first learned language sa bata. So, diri sa Cebu, Bisaya ang mother tongue. Ang mother tongue ang ilang gamiton para ma-learn ang alphabet, numbers, shapes, o colors through games and songs and dances nga ihatag or itudlo sa maestra. Next is preschool education is optional before entering elementary level since not everyone could afford the preschool education. Also, the recent events and activities show a high need for young children to undergo preschool education first before stepping into a formal education. Next, the primary education, ages 6 to 11. And this is consists of compulsory 6 grades, grades 1 to 6. And it is composed of the primary level and intermediate level. So in the primary level, this is grades 1 to 3, and in the intermediate level, grades 4 to 6. And these are the subjects taught in the primary education: mathematics, science, Filipino, English, Hikasi, or the Geografiya, Kasaysayan at Sibika. And the minor subjects are music, arts, physical education, and health. And the computer education and Heli are the additional minor subjects for the private schools only. The types of education are the following: moral training, professional training, intellectual training, vocational training, which is also we have it here in the Philippines, domestic training, physical, military, and civic training, science and philosophy education, aesthetic and cultural education, and the last one are the sports and games. So, naa-joy, naad, or nausab nga educational system after the Battle of Plataea. Mas na-enhance or nadagdagan ang mga types of education in Athens. Following are the content to be studied in the later Athenian education. First is in the lower elementary level. They already practice how to read and write. Also, they study arithmetic, poetry, and gymnastics. Second, in the higher elementary level, they already practice physical and military exercises, grammar, declamation, argumentation, and public speaking. So, ilaha dito sayo jud kayo gitudlo ang mga pang military nga exercises. Unlike diri sa Philippines, sa elementary wala pa jud na ang mga military nga mga subjects. Third is in secondary schools, geometry, astronomy, drawing, grammar, and rhetorics. So, mao ni ang mga content in the secondary schools. The fourth one is in the higher level, which is they already taught philosophy, mathematics, and science. The outstanding contributions to education and humanity. First is the Socratic method of teaching by Socrates. Second is in the realm of philosophy, in which the greatest world philosophers came from Greece, among whom were Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Third, another is in the field of mathematics. Euclidean geometry has been studied for 2,000 years, and it is still used up to the present time. Fourth is arts and classical literature are also great contributions. Of the contributions of the arts and classical literature are the School of Athens and the Odyssey and Iliad by the known poet Homer.
Next is the sports track katong gipangduaan. I mean sports track will prepare student with sports, mga duwa-duwa. Sport sciences, sport related, physical education related, health related, movement related courses which will let them explore and specialize in fields like sports, mga duwa, fundamental coaching, may mga coach, may mo lang coach, student athlete development, sports officiating, and activity management. Also, recreational and fitness or sports leadership. So, mao na ang sa sports track. So, under the academic track, there are 4 strands: the ABM, the UMS, STEM, and GAS. So, accountancy, business, and management, or the ABM. Hello there, guys. So, this subtest gauges the ability of the students in solving problem situation involving knowledge in some basic concepts of accounting, business, and management. So, mo ni ang gikuha sa nga Strand sa katong mahimong future accountant, mga business woman and man. So next is the Humanities and Social Science or HUMS. This subtask measures ability that require historical knowledge sa mga history sa nang So objectivity, civic competence, aptitude in the arts and originality, also leadership, self-discipline, propriety, and mentoring skills which are necessary in the field of education are likewise measured. So the third strand is the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or the STEM. So this measures intellectual openness and inquisitiveness. So the ability to interpret, analyze, synthesize, and evaluate data. It likewise measures mathematical reasoning, ability, justifying geometric relationships, and applying numerical concepts. It assesses the ability to apply ideas in deriving innovative and inventive solutions, ability to visualize, analyze, and draw conclusions from it. So medyo lisod siya because it's about science and engineering or mathematics. So mauna siya ang STEM. So next is the general academic strand or the GAS. So muna kong gikuha guys. So one of the four strands of the academic track for senior high school. So unlike the other career-specific strands, GAS is designed for students who are not decided yet on what course they want to take in college. So muna kong gikuha because wala pa sa kukabaon sa kuha na college. So in this strand, you can choose from the electiveness of the different tracks such as applied economics. So mo to applied economics, nami ani nga subject ng organizations and management, nasad mi ani niya. Humanities, social sciences, and disaster preparedness. So nami ani nga subject during our senior high school. So after the senior high school education, so we proceed to the tertiary education or the higher education. So CHED is responsible in the formulation and implementation of policies, plans, and programs for the development and efficient operation of the higher education system in the country. So ang CHED na ang responsible for tertiary education. Lahi sa to ang senior high school and elementary kay DepEd ang responsible ato. So the delivery of higher education in the Philippines is provided by private and public higher education institutions. So there are 3 stages of higher education. First is the bachelor degrees, so minimum of 4 years in duration. Next is the master degrees, typically span 2 years of full-time students culminating with minor thesis or comprehensive examination. And lastly, the PhD degrees or the Doctor of Philosophy involve great deal of coursework as well as dissertation that may comprise from 1/5 or 1/3 of the final grade. So that mauna ang sa tertiary education. So that's all guys. So that our topic is chapter 2, historical legal foundation of education. So thank you for listening. I hope you will understand kay nadyoy mga lain-lain nga tingog nga ni-occur sa video. So thank you.